Today, we're going to be looking at the market value on 5 trending players for Dynasty Fantasy Football to see whether or not you need to buy, sell, hold, or trade, or whatever you need to do to make these moves in your league to make your team better. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now. We're talking Dynasty every day, but we got to jump into this now. The first player we're talking about is a dandy. News dropped on him. It dropped rather hard. Aaron Rodgers is going to be hitting the market. He's going to be hitting the market. Old man Rodgers, over 40 years of age. Are we going to hang it up? Are we going to hang it up and it's going to be done? Are we going to hit the market, possibly be a Steeler, possibly be a Viking, possibly be a Brown, possibly be a Raider, maybe a Tennessee Titan? Get him, get Abdul Carter, keep it moving. We don't know. But he is an older quarterback. Last season, fantasy-wise, did not really go so well. Was not really a league winner for you. And you can definitely tell that on the field. There were some moments here and there, I guess. You can say that about him. But still, and the rankings say it, QB 37. He's ranked as a QB 2. And if he wanted to, he'll probably start somewhere and be viable for fantasy as a cheap option. And it really depends on how you play the game and what format you're playing in, whether it's 2 QB super flex, 1 QB. But this is a Moneyball cheap acquisition regardless, and you know this, and you know he's not going to play another 5 years. You know he's not going to play another 3 years. He might. I wouldn't put it past him, but you know it's not happening. You look at the numbers here, a 67.6% true completion rate from playerprofiler.com, ranks 30th among quarterbacks. That is a stat from a guy named Aaron Rodgers, who's one of the top quarterbacks in the league, indicating we don't have it anymore. We're not a top quarterback in the league. We are starting to push down the Deshaun Watson territory when it comes to that kind of efficiency. So what if we do not have a Garrett Wilson or a Devontae Adams? What if we go somewhere without that? We're not really playing out of a clean pocket too often, 33rd among quarterbacks, but our true passer rating, 16th among quarterbacks, middle of the road. We're not there anymore. Our deep ball completion rate's all right, and you're seeing that in the grid from PFF down below, and it's ranked 10th among quarterbacks. So maybe there's something there if we're paired with a good wide receiver. But you look at all the openings, where are all the good wide receivers at? It's only with the Giants, really. And they're in a position, maybe they can make this move. Aaron Rodgers and Malik Nabers. And hopefully he's smart enough to give Malik Nabers 40% share of the targets. Hopefully he does that. But that's about the only spot. George Pickens and the Steelers. But George Pickens might not be with the Steelers because they're sour grapes there. There's not many great landing spots for him to go to. There's just not. Maybe the Vikings in a weird move, but that's doubtful. I mean, you got McCaffrey, you got Darnold there you can bring back, and you know what you got in there. It just does not make sense, even though I saw that on the internet. That just doesn't make sense. Aaron Rodgers might just need to hang this one up and not go another season with a bad football team. That's what I would do, unless you really, really love the game that much. You're looking at trade scenarios, and honestly, it's just cheap junk. It's cheap junk trades at this point. He may not be on the field in 2025, or he may be with a bad team and he's just getting you by because you don't have anything else. That is what we're looking at. Cheap junk. When I look at adjacent players, like I always say, I kind of look at that as the starting point for creativity, not one for one. And I look at it in a vacuum too. And I just say cheap junk in this area. And you might get a season out of him. You could if he wants to come back and just play for another team. Maybe. But I guarantee his contract, age, and all that, and want to play for a team that at least has something there to look forward to. He's at least going to bring in some prospects to that team. Aged prospects. But still, that's something to look forward to if he goes to your team. The next man is Deebo Samuel. Might be getting traded in the next few weeks once it opens up, and that's something to look forward to. This also makes the wide receiver market more enticing for the NFL, for fantasy. It's not a deep wide receiver class right now for the 2025 NFL draft, so a guy like Deebo could land in a fair situation. Valued as wide receiver 50 We're 29 years old. In a year, we will be 30. We're past the age apex. We did get 3 wide receiver 1 weeks, 2 wide receiver 2 weeks, a lot of downer games. And of course, when you're mostly a wide receiver 3 or worse from week 11 to the end of the season with 1 spike week, the market's going to tank you. It's going to tank you. It's tanked in ADP. It's tanked on Keep Trade Cut. It's tanked everywhere. And he's a guy you couldn't trade these last few years. They know he's a banged-up player who's aging. He's a hard guy to get value for, so you're not really going to get anything on the market. So if you have him, you just have him on your roster and just pray and he goes to an okay spot. A spot where he'll get used, a spot where he can get some targets, and you're hoping he's healthy. You're hoping you get something back for him that you feel okay about. Last year, when you look at the numbers, and this is really the story of Deebo Samuel, almost a 20% target share, but an 8 out of 6.8. That says this is a player you do not depend on. This is a player that's very spiky. When you got an 8 out of 6.8, you better have like a 25+% target share for you to be reliable, or you're getting more in the rushing game like he sometimes do in some seasons, or spike week touchdowns could happen, but at this age, it's hard to do, especially going to a new system. Route participation rate, almost 80%, down a little bit. We did have some injuries baked in there. 90 routes ran. You're looking at 26 routes ran per game, so we're on the field an okay bit. But you're looking at a wide receiver here that needs to go to the right situation, that needs used more downfield. For him to be viable in fantasy, he needs to get more work downfield, and he needs a higher target share. I think that's going to be hard for him to do. There are some offenses he could go to, but usually bad quarterback play, I think selling him is going to be very hard. I don't think he's very liquid on the market. Win now teams, I mean, he's not in a position where he might not win now. And if you're rebuilding, what are you going to get out of him? You're not going to get anything, so why are you going to buy him? And when you're looking at the adjacent players, just a lot of cheap players. Cooper Kupp, who's in the same situation, might have a little bit more sprite to him. Jalen Coker, upside play. Romeo Doubs, upside play, but we know what he is, so it's not much up to that upside. Rashid Shaheed, coming back from the injury, but a spike week dandy if you want one. Juwan Jennings, probably going to get a lot of work in this offense going forward. And Darnell Mooney on the Bears, probably going to have a good year next year. Could, and he's cheap for the money considering that. But Juwan Jennings, we were just talking about him. So I want to know what the market was going to do with him. Nobody has reacted much to this news. It was the Super Bowl time, so imagine it's going to happen here next few days. But Juwan Jennings is probably going to be solid on this team for the short term. This team might be looking at another wide receiver for the long term. And when I look at where they're at in the draft and who could fall to him, Luther Burden is very comparable or similar, but not a comparison, who has some facets in his game that is like, how can I say comparable without saying I'm comparing the players? I don't know, but has some likeness to Deebo Samuel. He can be used in the run game. You can use him on the short targets. He would fit nicely in this offense. However, at that spot in the draft, offensive tackle is looking good for them, and that is another position in need, beefing up that offensive line. Juwan Jennings held it down for a few moments, but he wasn't really a cash cow either, but he was a guy you're looking at in redraft, a big pickup here and there, valued as wide receiver 47. When I look at him for Dynasty Fantasy Football, this is easy. You do not want him as a rebuilding team. You probably don't even want him as a middle-of-the-road team. You kind of want him on the back end of your depth chart for a win-now team that you know and you feel good right now. February, early February, right after Super Bowl, that's going to make the playoffs. And that's going to make the playoffs. Not what if, they could, maybe, shoulda, woulda, coulda, any of that stuff. You know, because he's not for long. He's going to be 28 years old soon. His contract's going to be up here in a little bit. Target share, great, almost 27%. ADOT, not so great. This screams volatility. You need a little deeper ADOT, at least 11 to 12% for me to feel a little bit better for you with that 26% target share. This screams that you're going to have some spike weeks and you're going to have a lot of down weeks. And that's what we saw on the scoring charts. We saw spike weeks. We saw down weeks. We're not seeing much volume in the offense. Brandon Ayuk's going to be back. Things are looking very sketchy here. And I'm not going to really invest unless it's super, super cheap. Cheaper than wide receiver 47 even. Yak ain't good. 46 among wide receivers. So the upside is going to be spiky, and that target share might get messed with here. Adjacent players, he's cheap. He's cheap. I would want him cheaper than what I'm seeing here. I would want him damn near free. I want him as an afterthought. That ain't happening now. The cards are going to be held a little bit closer to those dynasty managers' chests. But what I think about Juwan Jennings, if they pick up another wide receiver in a draft, and it took a little bit of time for these wide receivers to acclimate to the system, he might be okay for 2025 where you pick him up as a cheap chip for a team, like I said, win now, and you just roll with it and try and get it for a wide receiver here that you're not planning to start but to use in a pinch. Ricky Pearsall is a guy that I could see taking a shift forward because people drafted him in the second round of rookie drafts last year as a first-round wide receiver. This team drafted him in the first round because they were looking at two aging wide receivers here that they knew they had to make a move on. And Deebo Samuel's getting that move. And Ricky Pearsall is going to step in and get some opportunities. At least that's what the narrative's going to say. And we rocked it out last 2 games of the season. That held his ADP, his rankings, his keep trade cut up strong, and the market's not dumping him. So that means there's optimism. So if you want to sell on this notion and you can catch something out of him, if you like the 2025 draft a lot better, here you go. Here you go. This might be your move, especially if that deal gets done and he goes on the trade block. Ricky Pearsall is a good route runner. He's smooth. He can be productive in his offense. It was his rookie season coming back from some injuries. He got shots, so you got to put that in perspective here. Ricky Pearsall was in a weird situation here as a rookie. Weird situation. This team was weird too. This might be a year 2 bounce back, come up, turn the leaf over type of deal. Ricky Pearsall had an okay target share. ADOT was all right. ADOT downfield a little bit. I would want the target share to increase, but with Deebo out, that could increase a little bit. But Brandon Ayuk's going to be in. Route participation, 76%. Running about 26 routes per game, comparable to Deebo. Air yards, a little bit up there. We're getting about 50 air yards a game. Things are getting pushed downfield. Maybe that increases. We need to push to more of a 20% target share with that 11 ADOT. Will be more of a spike week dandy. The touchdowns is going to make him a spike week dandy. But we have that upside. We're going into year 2. Also, I don't look at these stats as projectable going into his year 2, considering the injuries and everything else in this offense. I think there's room for a lot of growth here. There's also room for a lot of stabilization to this, too. That being said, when I look at Ricky Pearsall, I think he's cheap. I think he's cheap upside in this offense. So if you're looking for that, but I don't think he's going to be as cheap now. People are going to be holding those cards tighter. The time to buy was when he wasn't doing anything in season. That's over. These players like this, year 2 players that people got hopium for, are going to hold them a little tighter. See things through. Maybe through the draft, maybe through training camp. If we catch them down games, week 1, 2, or 3, that's when you can buy in. That's when that can happen. That's when you'll go in on Ricky Pearsall. Right now, you could try to do it. It may not be advantageous for you, but he's going to be held a little bit tighter now. Brandon Ayuk, he's an afterthought, and we told you that the value was too high for him last year. He was wide receiver 13 in the middle of the year last year. He was a little higher than that right before the season started, and the value was a little too high. Like the narrative among Brandon Ayuk was, he's a can't miss, he's good, he's this. He's an aging wide receiver prospect, soon to be 27 years old, had a contract stipulation to his name. Also, they brought in Ricky Pearsall, which was a head scratcher going into the season. We had an injury last year, but we only had 1 wide receiver 1 game. We only had 5 wide receiver 1 games in the last 2 seasons, 4 last year when you look at it that way. And you had a bunch of wide receiver 3 games this year. But there are some things to look at in the stats that are very enticing. The targets. You have multiple games here, 5 targets or more. All of them but 2. So the volume's there for Brandon Ayuk. A 24% target share and an 8 out of almost 12. That says he's going to be steady. However, he wasn't steady. The targets weren't connecting, but the route participation rate up there at 90%. At this rate, at his contract, the out for his contract is in 2026, so we got to put it together this year. And then we got it in 2026 on top of that. So he's a cheap buy. You're getting 2 years with the Niners at him being the main guy. They paid for him. They got him the contract. They said, hey, we need him. We got Ricky Pearsall. We drafted him, but you're a guy. You're a guy. We're going to keep you, and you're going to get around a 25% target share, and that is something to look at. At this price, you're buying a 25% target share at around wide receiver 30 clip. However, that price just went up, so we're looking at a guy that's going to be held closer to the chest. That's not going to be as liquid anymore. But when you look at those stats, I'd rather have him at wide receiver 25 than at wide receiver 10, 11, 12, 13. That's where the prices were at. And the market sentiment was very high on him. And he should have been bumped down. This is where he probably should have been valued, around wide receiver 20 to 25 range. That's where he's going to go up to. People are going to come back to the notion. That chart's going to trend back up. That chart is going to trend back up. We'll do this video again on him, or this segment on him, in the next few months. That chart's going to trend back up. Hopefully I remember this, what I just said, and I'll just reclip it with that so I let you know. Because we guessed the market, and then that lets you make an idea of what to do with him. He's come back from an injury too. That's something to pay attention to. But wide receiver 29 in value. Wide receiver 29 in value, dirt cheap. We're in no man's land almost, but there's upside plays here. However, you know what you're going to get when he's healthy and on the field and in this offense. You know what's going to happen. Maybe he's a sell option for some of these people as well. Thinking on both lines. But it's going to be hard to go in and buy. That's one thing. You should have bought in season if you liked him. You should have looked at that target share, even though the fantasy scoring was not good. The fantasy scoring for him was not good. A lot of people were down on him. However, he was a huge pickup in redraft. A lot of people were drafting him because you saw wide receiver 3 week, wide receiver 3 week, wide receiver 3 week. But the targets were there. The air yards were there, especially the A-dot. That is something you want to look at. And A-dot, good targets, that is something that is very projectable week to week for wide receivers. I think Brandon Ayuk is a player on the cheap. If you can catch him cheap still, I don't think you can. Is a guy to look at. I'm not totally in. I like keeping it young. But if you're looking to money ball it, you're getting a good A-dot. You're getting some good target share coming your way with Brandon Ayuk. And outside of that, you got to let the chips fall where they may. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. Thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video.